The Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education is an equal opportunity employer. The school district does not discriminate against employees on the basis of any protected class, including if that employee has a disability. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, specifically prohibits discrimination against qualified individuals with disabilities. You are considered a qualified individual with a disability if you have the requisite skill, experience, education, and other job-related requirements to be employed in a particular job. You must also be able to perform the essential functions of that job, either with or without a reasonable accommodation. It is up to the school board, your employer, to make a reasonable accommodation when we are aware that a qualified individual with a disability has a particular physical or mental limitation. For example, if we know an employee uses a wheelchair, we need to make sure that employee is able to access all of his or her workspaces and facilities. Some of the most common disabling conditions we see are back injuries, injuries to extremities, heart conditions, diabetes, psychiatric or mental impairments like depression and anxiety, and neurological conditions such as chronic migraines. Oftentimes, such conditions can be reasonably accommodated through job restructuring, part-time or modified work schedules, reassignment to a vacant position, acquisition or modification of equipment or devices, or making appropriate adjustments to policies. There are some limitations on what accommodations an employer is required to make. An employer does not have to make an accommodation that would cause an undue hardship on business operations. For example, if you are a teacher and you experience disabling anxiety when you're around children, it would be unduly burdensome for the school board to create an accommodation that allows you to continue to teach while limiting your contact with children. An accommodation decision should always be a conversation between the employee and the employer. If you have a disability or become disabled and find that you are having difficulty doing your job, it is important for you to notify your supervisor. You have to let someone know if you want an accommodation to start the conversation.
Hey Bernadette, how's it going?
Oh, okay, I guess.
I hope you don't mind me saying so, but you don't seem okay.
Well, you're right. I'm not. You've been working here for quite a while. Do you have a few minutes I can talk to you about something?
Sure.
Okay. Can we sit down over here?
Yeah.
Well, what it is, I went to my doctor last week because my wrist has really been bothering me a lot, and it appears that I do have carpal tunnel syndrome.
Oh, I've heard that can be really painful. I'm so sorry.
Well, it's okay. I'm going to physical therapy, and I may not have to have surgery. I think, it should get better, but the problem is right now, my supervisor.
What do you mean?
Well, the doctor wrote me a note, and it stated for me not to do any keyboarding or typing. And she said that she was not going to honor it because that's a big part of what I do, typing through the day. And I'm just afraid if I continue, typing on it the way that I do, it's only going to make it worse. And right now, it just really hurts.
Oh man, I'm so sorry you are dealing with all of this. I'm no expert, but that doesn't sound right to me. My doctor wrote a note for me last year when I pulled a muscle in my back and I didn't have to lift anything over 10 pounds. They should be doing what your doctor's note says, right?
Well, that's what I would think too, but in this case she's not. So I really just don't know what to do, and I don't want to make Charlotte mad because I really need my job.
Well, she can't fire you for asking her to follow your doctor's note. You need to talk to the Human Resources Department. They'll be able to help you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll give them a call. Thanks. And so that's what happened. But here, I brought a copy of my doctor's note. So can Charlotte still make me do the typing even though my doctor says I can't?
Well, Bernadette, that's a really good question. It's one we get all the time. Just because a doctor writes you a note doesn't mean that the employer is required to do what the doctor says.
Oh, well, then what's the point of getting the doctor's note at all?
Well, it's very helpful to us. It helps us to know if you have a condition that's a disability, and it gives us an idea of what kind of accommodations we might be able to make to help the employee continue to work. I want to tell you a little bit about the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's a law that protects employees who are diagnosed with disabilities that affect major life activities. And a really good example of a condition that might be considered a disability is diabetes. For example, it might be a reasonable accommodation for an employer to allow an individual periodic breaks throughout the day so that he or she can check blood sugar or get a snack and just maintain those glucose levels so that the employee is able to continue working and manage their diabetes while they're at work.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And I am asking for job accommodation, and I keep hearing you use the word reasonable. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it really depends on each individual situation. A reasonable accommodation is one that doesn't take away necessarily an essential function of the employee's job. So you might think that a request is reasonable, but if it significantly limits your ability to perform a major portion of your job, the employer might not think it's reasonable. So what we need to do is to figure out what accommodations can be made and still allow you to perform the essential functions of your job.
So in my case, can Charlotte just ignore my request as well as the doctor's note and tell me that I still have to do the typing?
Well, she can't just ignore it. What we have to do is have an interactive conversation about what the condition is, what kind of accommodations are being requested, what the job entails, and see if we can come out to a workable solution. So your supervisor has to engage in conversation or discussion with you so that we can figure out what is really reasonable.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's what I want because I really don't want to lose my job. As far as, you know, reasonable accommodation.
Right. So I've looked at your job and at your doctor's note, and it seems like typing is a pretty large portion of your job, pretty important. But I imagine there are other things that you also do at work that are also important. So run through a few of the things that you do.
Well, I spend a lot of time on the phone, routing calls, emailing messages and everything. I do process reports, and I also do a lot of filing.
Okay. And are you the only one who does that, or is there someone else? Do you share responsibilities with someone?
Yes, it's two of us that do it, me and Jack.
Okay. All right. Well, so is there a difference in the volume of your work over a time frame?
Through the summer, it does kind of slack off a little bit with the typing. It's not as much data entry and everything, so that would definitely work. And you know, and I'm thinking even if we could, for a couple of months, just, you know, he do the typing and I, you know, maybe do some of the other responsibilities. Right. That may be that would be wonderful, you know, and that also would help me. But I'm afraid once again school starts then and it picks back up, you know, it would be too much for Jack to do by himself.
Right. So what we can try to talk to Charlotte about would be making a temporary accommodation. You mentioned earlier that you were hoping to be able to resolve some of this through physical therapy for a short period of time. And so perhaps you could switch off and Jack could do the bulk of the typing during the summer, and you could pick up his filing and phone messages. Maybe instead of emailing the phone messages, you could use paper and pencil and take them on a while you were out pad. And hopefully by the end of that time, you said you have an appointment near the end of the summer, we'll have a better idea of what we need to do moving forward.
Okay, that sounds good. Hi, Ann.
Hey, Bernadette.
How are you?
Good. good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad I bumped into you the other day, and I just want to thank you for giving me the advice to go talk to an HR representative. Pam was very helpful.
Good. So it's all worked out?
Yeah, Jack and I are going to divide the work, and he has been willing to do a lot of the typing so that, you know, that'll give me time to rest my wrist and everything again while I'm going to physical therapy. And so I'm very glad he was willing to help me out. He's a very good coworker.
Oh, good. So what happens if your wrist doesn't heal?
Well, that is the downside. You know, if I continue to have any problems or anything, it could pose a problem. But my doctor is thinking that they're very hopeful in the time frame that I should be able to, you know, rest it. And as long as I'm not doing a lot of typing, that it should heal okay. And when after summertime ends, I should be able to resume my normal, you know, work duties and everything. So
great news.
Yeah, and so if it happens that there still needs to be accommodations, then, you know, we'll look into that when the time comes.
Good.
So,
Glad to hear it.
yes,
Yay.
thank you so much.